All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Module 2. In Module 2, we're going to talk about the All Hazards umbrella. All right, so the All Hazards umbrella entails preparation for a wide range of natural and human-made disasters. This is one of the things that came up in that quadrennial report, right? This new All Hazards approach. If you think about this, think about the coordination that is required to use this all hazards approach. Like you're gonna have coordination between all levels of government, variety of different agencies. Right? Think about what that would take, both from a policy standpoint, from a resource standpoint. Like this is a huge, huge undertaking. This all hazards approach. The other question is, can you really prepare for whatever may happen? Right? Because all hazards, that's what you're saying. We're preparing for whatever may happen. Is that even possible? Should you? Or should you focus on the things that you think are going to be the most common and then hopefully be prepared enough to where you can just move into something else if this other thing that isn't supposed to happen or doesn't happen very often would happen? Okay, so think about that kind of as we're going through this. All right, so under this all hazards umbrella, there's three levels of potential danger. First, there's hazards, and hazards are a condition that pose potential risks that can result in either an emergency event or a disaster. Okay, so hazard is just a condition that poses risk. Then you have emergency events. That's when a hazard results in a condition of risk, which necessitates some kind of intervention by emergency response institutions. Okay, and then after that, you have what are known as disasters. Okay, and disasters are when emergency response institutions are unable to contain the emergency event or stabilize one or more critical services. Okay, so you have these three levels: hazard, emergency event, and then disaster. You often hear about disaster declarations. Those are made by the president after the request from a governor. All right, so as part of this all hazards approach, we obviously have terrorism, right? That's a man-made disaster potentially. All right, so it's called the terrorism nexus, and you have kind of these conventional and non-conventional kind of hazards associated with terrorism. So terrorism threats are kind of on this scale as well, based on technological sophistication and the amount of threat potential that they have based on weapons used. Okay, so on the low end, you have these conventional weapons, things like firearms, which are the most common weapon used by terrorists. Right? We all hear about the bombs and suicide bombs and all these things, but actually, firearms are the most common weapon. You're talking about things like small arms, other handheld weapons, the most commonly used weapons, but it can also include things like submachine guns, assault rifles, rocket propelled grenades, those types of things. But small arms and handheld weapons are the most commonly used weapons by terrorists. Also, you have explosives under conventional weapons. Terrorists also commonly use explosives to attack symbolic targets. Oftentimes, they're self constructed, like they build them themselves, but it could also be military grade stuff that they can get their hands on. Plastic explosives, Semtex, C4, that sort of thing. There's also AFNO explosives, which is ammonia nitrate and fuel oil. That's a fertilizer bomb. Okay. So you have other types of bombs. You have gasoline bombs. They're the most common, most easily manufactured. It's literally just a gas-filled bottle with a flaming rag on it for a trigger. Also known as Molotov cocktails. Okay, so it's just a bottle with a rag that's set on fire, and they throw it. Pipe bombs are pipes filled with explosives, which is usually gunpowder, and then you cap them. They often have shrapnel attached to them, bolts, nails, stuff like that to expand what they're able to do. You have vehicular bombs, vehicles wired with explosives. These are frequently used by terrorists. Then you have IEDs or improvised explosive devices. These have a wide range of power and effectiveness. These are bombs that are constructed using limited equipment, limited materials, kind of using whatever they have laying around to build a bomb. Terrorism nexus, you also have chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive hazards. These are often referred to as CBRNE weapons. Um, we'll talk about these later in more detail, but you talk about things like chemical agents, biological agents, radiological agents, nuclear weapons, and explosives. All right, so as part of this all hazards, we also have non-terrorist threats, right? So prior to 9/11, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, their task was to provide primary leadership for domestic emergencies. There's two main events that really exposed shortcomings with FEMA and their approach. One was Hurricane Andrew, and the other was Hurricane Katrina. Both of these events were disasters, and what happened is like Hurricane Andrew happened in the 80s. Well, during the 80s was the Cold War, and everyone was focused on the nuclear threat posed by the Soviet Union and others. So there was so much focus on this nuclear threat that there wasn't nearly as much focus on things like natural disasters, which led to Hurricane Andrew. And then Katrina happened post 9/11. So again, you had this, kind of laser focus on terrorists right after 9/11. And then Katrina happened, and they were wholly unprepared to handle something like Katrina. So these two cases really highlighted this need for this all hazards approach to emergency preparedness. Like you can't just focus on the nuclear threat, you can't just focus on the terrorist threat. You got to be prepared, kind of across the board, which is why this all hazards approach is what we have now. So the core concepts of all hazards, there's four main sequential concepts. The first is mitigation of risk, and these are pre-emergency initiatives that are designed to reduce the potential costs and destructiveness of disasters. This is stuff you do ahead of time. Okay, and these require partnerships between government and private agencies. Government cannot do everything, in spite of what they tell you. Okay, government cannot do everything, so they have to have these partnerships between government and these other private agencies, especially when you're talking about something as broad and encompassing as Homeland Security, especially all hazards. The second is preparedness planning. This is the design and adoption of emergency management contingencies prior to the occurrence of the situation. So this is having things in place, ready to go before something happens. So having these preparations in place should make things more efficient and should, both the response and the recovery, like everything should go much more smoothly because you already have things in place. You already have a plan ready to go. But like we kind of mentioned earlier, right, you can prepare all you want, but you cannot anticipate everything, right? There's no way to anticipate every kind of possible disaster that may strike the United States. Okay, so it has to be, even though it's got plans in place, these plans have to be flexible, they have to be adaptable to where you could take something that's already planned and change it up a little bit and apply it to this new scenario that just happened because they weren't prepared for whatever this was going to be. The third one is emergency response operations. These are the coordinated interventions that take place when emergencies happen. Okay, so you're talking about the deployment of significant personnel, significant equipment, right? This is putting your preparedness planning into action. All right, because again, these disasters and these things are not predictable, so you have to have these plans in place that are flexible enough, but you have to have everything ready to go because you have to have these coordinated interventions ready when the emergencies happen, be it government and private. Like everybody's got to know what to do. Everybody's go and do their thing. And then the fourth is recovery systems. This is trying to get the affected area, whatever natural disaster, man-made disaster, whatever it is, trying to get that area back to what it was like prior to that occurring. So we're talking about rebuilding infrastructure and restoring the area and the populations there to the pre-disaster norm. What was it like before that? That's what we're trying to get it back to. Obviously, this is going to be expensive, and depending on how much took place, what kind of disaster it was, you're talking about something long-term as well sometimes. All right, so we talked about these partnerships a little bit already. So fortunately, FEMA has recognized that government cannot do everything alone, right? They cannot meet all the challenges posed by disasters, whether natural, man-made, whatever they are, okay? So they have formed these partnerships to try to have this collaborative effort from all segments of society. Okay, this is called the whole community approach. Okay, so they realize that these other people, these other groups, these other agencies, whatever, they all have a special skill set that they can use in a natural disaster. And by utilizing these special skill sets, it can make the response much more efficient, much more effective. Okay, provided that there's enough organization and the planning has gone well enough to where everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. All right, so now we have some natural hazards, and I'm not going to get into a ton about these. You can read about what each of these things are. Um, but natural hazards are emergency incidents arising from non-human causes. We talk about things like earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. So obviously you can plan for these kind of things, and depending on what part of the country you're in, some of these are more common, than others. Like in this part of the world, we have a lot of tornadoes, floods, but we don't really have hurricanes, right? So depending on where you're at, you can plan a little bit better for what may happen. But again, everything is unanticipated. It's unpredictable. It's unique. At least like hurricanes, you see them coming. But like tornadoes, all of a sudden you have tornadoes. So some of these things are much more unanticipated as others. All right, so you have things like tropical cyclonic storms. These are rotating, organized systems of clouds and thunderstorms um, that have low-level circulation. They can create a lot of damage. They're classified by the force of their winds, whether it's a tropical depression, tropical storm, or a hurricane. Storm surges are what's pushed ahead, the water pushed ashore by approaching hurricanes. And sometimes the storm surges are almost worse, than the storms. There's videos all over the place about these storm surges hitting these places and people drowning and getting washed away. Pretty wicked stuff. But know how things are classified, know what each of those things are. Earthquakes, obviously earthquakes can cause massive damage. We had one in Missouri, a real massive one in 1812 that actually caused the Mississippi River to flow backwards, which is pretty amazing if you think about that. But earthquakes can be measured, but cannot accurately be predicted. They're measured with the modified Mercalli intensive scale, the MMI, or the Richter scale. Richter scale is usually the one that you hear most of the time, and those are the ones that are commonly reported. Earthquakes that occur beneath the ocean floor can result in sea waves called tsunamis. Those are massive waves when the seawater is displaced because of the earthquake. In 2011, there was an earthquake in Japan that was the fourth strongest since 1900. The resulting tsunami hit a nuclear power plant, causing 3 reactors to melt down. So tsunamis are a really bad deal, but they're related to earthquakes. Tornadoes, everybody knows what a tornado is. They're measured on the enhanced Fujita-Pearson scale, which is called the F scale. So you hear like F5, F4, that's what they're talking about. Floods, these occur everywhere. They occur in all 50 states. They affect more people, occur more frequently. So FEMA identified flood zones by the risk. So they have special flood hazard areas, and then they have non-special flood hazard areas. So then FEMA initiated the National Flood Insurance Program. You have wildland fires. These are always a problem in the United States. Every year, tens of thousands of fires burn millions of acres. Property damage, environmental destruction. But it's not just the fires that are a problem. The damage can lead to increased flooding, mudslides, right, and other kinds of environmental issues that can also be disasters. All right, we have technological scenarios. These are when human-created infrastructures or apparatuses, whatever you want to call them, when they malfunction, fail, or are destroyed. So you have grid infrastructure malfunctions. Obviously, communication, power grids are essential, to our quality of life, to commerce, to pretty much everything we do, right? So these could be accidental. You have things like a power surge, lightning strike, negligence where somebody doesn't take care of what they're supposed to do, or it could be intentional. A terrorist or a military attack could attack the grid, and that would be that really put us in a world of hurt, right? Couldn't communicate, no power. Hazardous material accidents, chemical, biological, radioactive material. Uh, these often only occur at the production facilities or during transport, right? 'Cause you have to move this stuff somehow, trains. Um, so there could be hazardous material accidents there. And then you have non-wildland fires. These are fires that occur like in a city. You know, a wildland fire is one that occurs out somewhere, but a non-wildland fire, obviously affects human infrastructure. It occurs in populated areas. They can be caused by natural causes, sometimes by accidents, or sometimes by arson, or criminal activity. All right, so we're going to stop there for this week or for this module. Be sure you do the readings. Be sure you do all your assignments, and I'll see you in the next module.